There is a page in a ledger in a bishop's house in Lancaster County with my handwriting on it, and beside my handwriting there is a blank space where a date should be. That blank space cost a woman 4 years of her life. It was not the bishop who left it blank, it was me, and for 31 years I have been the only man alive who knew what belonged in it. Let me tell you what that page was. In my church district, a man was not only a husband, he was an officer of the household. And an officer reports, if a wife would not do what a wife was expected to do, and I do not mean the dishes, and I do not mean the garden, and you already know what I mean, the ordnung did not say she had sinned against her husband. It said she had sinned against the order. And a sin against the order does not stay inside a bedroom. It goes to the deacon. It goes up. That is what obligated means. Not encouraged, not permitted. Obligated. I never reported her. I want you to understand the size of that sentence before I go any further, because I have spent 3 decades learning it. I did not report her, and I told myself for years that this made me a kind man. It did not. It made me something worse, and it took me until I was 56 years old sitting in a room with carpet across from a woman who did not speak my language to find out what. Most of what you've heard about this world comes from the women who left, and every word of it is true. But there's another side, the men who were handed the rules and told to enforce them. I was one of those men for 31 years, and the things I held the deepest, the things a man in my position was never permitted to say out loud, I couldn't fit into a video, so I wrote them down. A book called The Weight a Man is Given. The link is in the first comment and the description, and I'll tell you more before the end. For now, stay with me. I was 22 when I married her. She was 19. Old Order, Lancaster County. Our courtship lasted 5 months, which in my community was neither short nor long. It was simply the length the courtship was. We were baptized. We were published in church on a Sunday in September, and by the following month, there were 300 people in my father's barn eating roast chicken off borrowed plates. She wore blue. I wore the same black coat I still own, and it still fits, which I have never decided how to feel about. Here's what I was given, and I want to be precise because precision is the whole point of what I'm about to tell you. I was given a farm. I was given 180 acres and a milking parlor and 2 draft horses and a debt to my uncle. I was given a wife, and I was given the words of a bishop who told me on the day of my wedding with his hand on my shoulder and his beard against my ear that a household is a small church, and every small church has a head, and the head answers upward. I was given, in that single sentence, both a crown and a set of chains, and nobody told me they were the same object. What I was not given was any instruction whatsoever on what to do when the person placed under my authority turned out to be a person I loved. Nobody said that to a man. Nobody thought it needed saying. Let me explain the machinery now, because the machinery matters more than my feelings do, and because I have never once heard a man from my world lay it out plainly for anyone. There were 3 obligations placed on a husband in my district. I am not softening them. I'm not going to translate them into language that makes men like me look better. Here they are. The first was headship. The husband is the head. This was not metaphor. This was administrative. Decisions terminated at me. Money terminated at me. Discipline terminated at me. If my wife did something the district would not have blessed, the district did not go to her first. It came to me, and it asked me why I had not stopped her. The second was accountability, and this is the one that people outside never understand, because from the outside it looks like a privilege. I did not simply have authority over her, I was answerable for her. Those are not the same thing, and I would give a great deal to have understood the difference at 22. If she failed, I had failed. If she refused, I had refused. Her obedience was, in the eyes of the church, a report card with my name written at the top of it. The third was disclosure. If a serious and continuing refusal occurred inside a marriage, and refusal of the marriage bed was named specifically in a sermon from a bench in front of 300 people, in language plain enough that not one soul in that room could pretend they did not know what was meant, then the husband was obligated to bring it to the deacon. Not to shame her. That is what we were told. To bring the household back under order. That was the phrase. Back under order. As though a marriage were a horse that had wandered off a lane. Put those 3 together and you understand exactly where I was standing the first night she said no to me. She said it in October, 4 months married. She was sitting on the edge of the bed with her back to me, and she was not crying, and she was not angry, and she said, not tonight. And then she said, not for a while. And then she said nothing at all, and the nothing lasted 11 months. I want to be honest with you about what I felt in that first moment, because if I lie to you here, then nothing else I say tonight is worth anything. I did not feel compassion. I want to tell you I did. I felt exposed. My first thought was not what is wrong with her. My first thought was who is going to find out. That is the man I was. I lay awake that night doing arithmetic. And that is what the obligation does to you. It turns your wife into a sum. If I reported her, the deacon would come. If the deacon came, the bishop would follow. If she would not yield, there would be counsel, and if counsel failed, there would be a decision made about her standing. And standing is not a word. Standing is her mother. Standing is her sisters. Standing is whether the woman she had sat beside every second Sunday for 19 years would look her in the eye at a funeral. That is what I would have handed over, not a report. Her whole world, and if I did not report her, then I was the one in violation, not her, me. Because a husband who conceals is a husband who has placed his own household above the church, and there is a word for that too. Hochmut. Pride. The oldest sin we had, and the only one nobody ever forgives quietly. So I lay in the dark beside a woman who had turned her back to me, and I understood that whichever way I chose, one of us was going to be destroyed by it, and that I was the one who got to pick. I picked me. I have told myself that sentence for 31 years the way a man polishes a coin. I picked me. I protected her. I carried it. That is not what happened, and I am going to tell you what actually happened, and it is worse, because here is what I did not do. I did not ask her why. 11 months, 330-some nights lying beside her in that room, and I never once asked her why. Not out of respect, not out of gentleness. I did not ask, because asking would have meant hearing an answer, and an answer would have been information. And information is the one thing an obligated man cannot afford to have. Do you see it? If she had told me she was in pain, I would have known. If she had told me she was frightened, I would have known. If she had told me she was grieving, and she was, and I will come to that, I would have known. And a man who knows is a man who has something to report. So I built my silence, and I let everyone believe, including myself, that I had built it to protect her. I built it to protect myself from having to know. There's a part of this I can't get to here, in the few minutes a video gives me, so I wrote it down instead, slowly, without the softening every algorithm asks for. It's the weight a man is given. 10 chapters, each one built around a single thing a man like me carries, an anvil, a black ledger, a lantern at the end of a lane, and what each one really cost the people I love. It's the confession of a man who held the authority and mistook the control for love. The link is in the first comment and the description. That's where the part I couldn't say out loud lives. Now let me tell you about the ledger, because you have been waiting for it since the first sentence. In our district, the deacon kept a book. Every household in the district had a line in it, and it was not a sinister thing to look at, and I need you to hold that because everyone wants the object to look like the crime. It was a plain black book with a plain cloth cover, and it sat on a plain shelf in a plain house 6 miles from my farm, and in it were noted the ordinary things a district needs to note. Baptisms, marriages, counsel given, matters brought, that was the column. Twice a year before communion, a husband sat down with the deacon and answered for his household. Is there peace in your house? Is there submission in your house? Is there anything the church should know? I sat in that kitchen. I want you to see it exactly the way I still see it. When I close my eyes at 3 a.m, which I do. A kerosene lamp set between us on the table, the smell of coffee and wet wool, the tick of a clock on a shelf, the deacon's hands folded in front of him, and they were farmer's hands, cracked across the knuckles, split at the thumb from a winter of hauling wire. He was a good man. That is the part people cannot hold in their heads, and I need you to hold it. He was not a monster. He was a kind, tired, decent man doing exactly the thing he had been handed to do. He asked me, and I looked at him, and I said, there is peace in my house, and he wrote something, and beside it there was a space that he did not fill. I lied to a deacon with my hand flat on his table while my wife lay 11 months silent in a bed 6 miles away. And I walked out of that house, and I climbed into the buggy, and I sat there in the cold for a long time, listening to the horse breathe and shift in the traces. And I felt something I did not have a word for until I was 56 years old. I felt powerful. That is the confession. Not that I broke a rule, men break rules, that I enjoyed breaking it. Because in that buggy, in that cold, I had just done the only thing in 31 years that no man above me had authorized. I had done it about her body. I had done it without her knowledge. And I had made myself, single-handedly, the wall standing between my wife and the entire church. And I loved being the wall, and I called that love. And I drove home, and I unhitched the horse, and I came into the kitchen where she was standing at the stove with her back to me, and I did not tell her. I never told her, not once in 4 years. I let her go on, believing that at any moment the deacon might turn up at the end of our lane. She lived inside that fear because I never once said the 11 words that would have ended it. I have not told them, and I will not tell them. Do you understand what I am confessing to you? I held the one piece of information in the world that could have let that woman sleep at night, and I kept it, not out of cruelty. I have looked for the cruelty, and I cannot find it, and its absence is what makes this so much harder to carry. I kept it because a man who is carrying something is a man who is needed, and I would rather have been needed than have been kind. My father did the same thing to my mother. I know that now. I did not know it then. My brother did it to his wife, and his wife is still there, and she is 54, and she still flinches at buggies. I have sat in a barn and watched a grown man in my own district weep into his hands and say the words, "I never reported her," the way another man would show you a war medal. That is what the obligation actually makes. It does not make enforcers. That is what everyone outside assumes, and they are wrong. It makes martyrs. It makes men who take a rule that was designed to expose a woman and quietly convert it into a debt she does not even know she owes. And that is the whole mechanism, and no one in that world will ever say it out loud, so I am saying it. The men were handed a weapon we never asked for, and then we discovered that not using the weapon made us heroes in our own kitchens. There is no sermon anywhere in the Ordnung that warns a young man about that particular pleasure. Now let me tell you what she was grieving, because I have made you wait for it, and I have made you wait for it on purpose, exactly the way I made myself wait for it. We lost a child in her 7th month. She was 20. I was 23. It happened in February upstairs in the room at the top of the stairs. My mother was there, her mother was there, and I was in the barn because that is where men were, and afterward we did not speak of it because that is what was done. There was a small service, there was a hymn out of the Ausbund, there was a casserole on the counter and a second casserole behind it, and then there was Monday. And 8 months after that, she sat on the edge of our bed with her back to me and said, "Not tonight." And I did arithmetic. I want to say that slowly so that it lands on you the way it landed on me the first time a counselor said it back to me in her own words, in a quiet room with a box of tissues on a table between us that I did not touch, because a man does not. My wife lost a child and could not bear to be touched, and I looked at the woman who had lost that child, and my very first act as her husband was to calculate my own exposure. I never reported her. That is true. That is the thing I have held up in front of my own face like a lantern for 31 years, every time I could not sleep. But she did not know that I hadn't, and I never gave her that. And for 11 months, and then for 4 years, she flinched every single time a buggy slowed at the end of our lane, and I watched her flinch, and I said nothing. Because that silence was the only thing in the world that was mine. She left in the spring. She was 28 years old. There was a shunning, and I am not going to describe it to you, because it is not mine to describe. That story belongs to her, and I have taken enough. I have stayed, I'm still here. I want to be clear with you about that, because I am not a man who got out and turned around to look back at it from a safe distance. I'm a man still standing in the middle of the field, still holding the tool in my hands, describing it to you. Eventually I found a doctor, an English one, in a town I will not name, and then a counselor, because a bishop I trusted told me very quietly on a bench after a funeral that a man who cannot sleep is no use to anybody. And in that room I learned words I had gone 56 years without ever hearing: coercion, consent, control, and one sentence I have never gotten over, which is that the absence of a punishment is not the presence of a kindness. I never raised a hand to that woman. I never reported her. I want both of those things on the record, and I also want you to understand what I have finally learned at the end of 31 years, that a man who stands in front of you listing all the things he did not do is a man who has not yet turned around and looked at what he did. So here's what I did. I made her afraid of a knock on a door for 4 years, and I let her stay afraid because her fear was the place where my importance lived. If you were ever handed authority over another person before anyone bothered to teach you what authority was for, I see you. If you have ever protected someone from a thing that you were also the source of, and called that love, and gone to bed proud of yourself, I know precisely what that pride tastes like, because I ate it every night for 3 decades. And I can tell you it does not thin out with age. It only gets quieter. They told us a household is a small church. They never told us what a man does when he is given a congregation of 1. If you want the rest, the full account from a man still standing inside the thing he's describing, not at the end of it, it's all in the weight a man is given. Links in the first comment and the description. 240 pages of what I was never allowed to set down anywhere else. Open the drawer with me. Until next time, light the fire, but don't forget to speak.